Patriarch Bartholomew continues to amaze with his statements, which hardly have to do with both truth and Christian love. In October 2020, he announced that the Ukrainian Orthodox Church no longer exists, that he tolerates temporarily His Beatitude Onuphry and other hierarchs of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Ukraine, while the creation of the OKU affected favorably the church life in Ukraine. In the spirit of pastoral sensitivity, we temporarily tolerate the existence of Ukrainian hierarchs not as local ruling bishops, but only as titular, or those who have a residence in Ukraine. For this reason, writes the head of Phanar, His Eminence Onuphry is no longer regarded as the canonical Metropolitan of Kyiv, but as a hierarch who resides in Kyiv. Consequently, for Patriarch Bartholomew, His Beatitude Onuphry is no longer the Metropolitan of Kyiv, but just a certain hierarch living in Kyiv. What to say? Let's give now the floor to Patriarch Bartholomew himself of the 2014 sample, when he greeted Onuphry just like this: His Beatitude, Metropolitan of Kyiv.
Варфоломей, архиепископ Константинополя, Нового Рима и Вселенский Патриарх, Его Высокопреосвященству Онуфрію, блаженнішому митрополиту Київському. З братньою радістю ми дізналися про обрання вас на історичний і славний престол Київської митрополії. Напередодні світлого свята Преображення молимося Господові Ісусу Христу, щоб Він дарував вашому блаженству духовну силу вести стадо віруючих до споглядання Його божественної благодаті.
At the same time, Patriarch Bartholomew gifted His Beatitude Onuphry with a bishop's crosier as a symbol of the power of the legitimate Metropolitan of Kyiv. In 2016, he greeted His Beatitude as Metropolitan of Kyiv at the Pan-Orthodox Conference in Chambézy. But even this is not the main thing. His Beatitude Onuphry more than worthily carries out the obedience of the primate of the Ukrainian Church. He is a truly folk bishop, loved and revered immensely by his flock, it being millions of Orthodox Christians throughout Ukraine. It is enough to watch the video from the cross processions of the UOC in recent years. 250,000 participated in 2018 in Kyiv, 300,000 in 2019. These are all members of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church communities, of which there are about 12,500 in Ukraine. They are spiritually guided by 12,400 priests. Do these people or their ruling bishops no longer exist, according to Patriarch Bartholomew?
Это вообще очень смешно, и патриарх Варфоломей на самом деле себя просто компрометирует. И знаете, какое нам дело до того, что он у себя там в блокнотах, то есть в диптихах пишет, как он там нас записывает. Мы реальная церковь. Такое ощущение, что они не хотят видеть, то ли не видят там на берегах Босфора, то, что это огромнейшая церковь, одна из самых больших церквей православного мира, больше 100 епископов, 12,5 тысяч приходов. То есть получается, что какой-нибудь ПЦУшный, в кавычках, архиерей где-нибудь имеет 10 или 20 приходов, в какой-нибудь там области, восточноукраинской, южноукраинской, центральноукраинской, вот, а наш архиерей в той же области, за которым стоит 300-400 приходов, он не архиерей, он только титулярный.
In other words, the head of Phanar denies the obvious reality and invents an alternative reality instead. It means he is simply telling a lie. We do not intend to offend the ecumenical patriarch, but Christ, using the example of his communication with the Pharisees, told us who the father of lies is. Let's now trace how the views of Patriarch Bartholomew have changed in recent years regarding Ukraine. In 1992, he fully recognized and supported the ban on Philaret by the Russian Church. In 1997, he recognized him as anathematized. But in 2018, he suddenly named Philaret as canonical bishop. In 1997, Patriarch Bartholomew officially announced to Metropolitan Vladimir Sabodan that he recognizes the only jurisdiction of the Moscow Patriarchate in Ukraine. But in 2018, he decided that Ukraine is the jurisdiction of Phanar. In 2014, Patriarch Bartholomew congratulated His Beatitude Onuphry as the legitimate Metropolitan of Kyiv. But in 2020, he calls him simply a hierarch who lives in Kyiv. Even in our everyday secular life, if a person first says one thing and then for no reason changes his mind to the exact opposite, everybody knows such a person is not trustworthy. So, what if this person is the ecumenical patriarch? The head of Phanar claims that he changed his position for the sake of the believing Ukrainians. This happened with the absolute certainty that this is how normal order is restored, and that ecclesiastical life in Ukraine is beneficially affected. But let's see what was the benefit Patriarch Bartholomew did to Orthodox Ukrainians. Perhaps the unification of the country's believers took place, as Phanar had assured of. No. Of 100 bishops of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, only 2 joined the OKU. In 2 years, only 84 communities of the UOC voluntarily joined the OKU, 0.5% of all parishes, at the backdrop of the most rampant media propaganda and pressure from Poroshenko's government. Another 340 temples were seized by raiders of the OKU or illegally re-registered by deception. In all of these cases, the UOC communities were expelled from their temples. Nevertheless, they continue to exist. Divine services are held. Believers continue to pray. Some in garages, others in huts. Many have already built new temples to replace the ones taken away by Patriarch Bartholomew's henchmen.
Люди, які залишилися вірні церкві, які зараз будують храми, чи вже побудували, вони ще більше об'єдналися у свою таку громаду. Навіть тільки у нашій єпархії вже набирається до 10 храмів, які відбудовані. На місце захвачених храмів маємо нові храми, які достатньо скоро, завдяки старанням людей, возносять тепер свої хрести над усім світом, закликають до молитви.
But what is the benefit that, according to the head of Phanar, affected Ukraine? As already mentioned, these are 340 temples of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church which were seized or deceitfully re-registered in favor of the OKU. In these churches, locks were cut down with a grinder and doors were broken with a crowbar. The parishioners who tried to defend their temples eventually looked like this. The priests with their families were thrown out of their houses into the street. The communion tables were carried out from the churches by the raiders of the OKU directly onto the road. Still, there is a blessing for the Ukrainian Church, though not what Patriarch Bartholomew spoke about.
Навіть люди, які не ходили до церкви, зараз почали ходити до церкви. Я таких знаю десятки людей, просто які самі навіть підходили, казали, я ніколи не ходив чи не ходила до церкви, а зараз от я хочу просто йти, бо наша церква, та яка вже відбудована, вона заснована на нашій любові, вона зведена нашими стараннями, і ми хочемо, щоб у ній жили тільки добрі, благі почуття. Тому сказати, що ми щось від того втратили, отак категорично, ні. Мабуть, ми надбали душі тих людей, які навіть раніше в церкві не були, а зараз вони прийшли до церкви.
Note that these people did not go to the OKU, but the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the Church of His Beatitude Onuphry. For Phanar, the OKU is only a step on the path to absolute power in Orthodoxy. On November 8, 2020, Phanar ordained Bishop of Kyiv for its exarchate in Ukraine. After the ceremony, Patriarch Bartholomew criticized the Russian Church, the Amman meeting, but most importantly, he clarified this whole venture with the OKU. The care of the ecumenical throne was the motive and firm criterion for its decision to grant autocephaly to the Church in Ukraine. The ecumenical patriarchate was and remains the first throne in the Orthodox Church. Disputing the role of the great Church of Christ brings instability and disrupts the unity of orthodoxy. In other words, Patriarch Bartholomew in fact frankly admitted that all of his actions to legitimize the Ukrainian schismatics, which caused a shockwave both in Ukraine and throughout world orthodoxy, pursue one goal: to become a supreme dictator in the Orthodox world. Those who disagree to that, for example, Metropolitan Onuphry and the UOC hierarchs, violate the unity of orthodoxy, according to Patriarch Bartholomew. A few days later, in an interview with the National Herald, the head of Phanar said that ecclesiology must be reconsidered unless the Orthodox want to become a federation of Protestant churches. According to the head of Phanar, the problem of unity can be solved if it is recognized that there is a bishop in the Orthodox Church who is higher than other bishops and has exclusive power. But let's remember what Christ said about the primacy. You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Patriarch Bartholomew, therefore, persecutes the canonical church in Ukraine and tells lies about it, changes his position to the opposite, and strives for undivided power. What can one say on this matter? That the Orthodox world hardly needs such a primate of the ecumenical church. But this primate definitely needs the prayers of the Orthodox world.